I woke up to an email that cost me 120,000 miles and a friendship. The subject line was cheerful. Surprise trip. Happy birthday. Here's the shape of it when you zoom out. Some people give gifts to be seen as generous. Some give gifts to be seen, period. The surpriser is an archetype who believes spontaneity equals love. They delight in the reveal more than the logistics that follow. You've met them. Big gestures, big reactions, big mess for someone else to clean up. Across from that sits the planner, who treats time like a budget and travel like a project plan. The planner is boring until suddenly indispensable. Put those two in a friendship, and you get a velvet rope of affection tied to a tripwire. When the surpriser thinks, this will be epic, the planner hears, this will be expensive. I'm 32, a project manager at a small Chicago nonprofit, and I save airline miles the way my mom saved grocery coupons. Quietly, strategically, for when it really matters. Those miles were earmarked for a grant presentation in July that could fund 3 after-school programs. Miles, in my head, weren't just points. They were permission slips to show up prepared. If you've ever hoarded a resource because it made you feel safe, you know the feeling. Every point a little vote of confidence. You don't drain that account without asking. The sender was Tyler, my college friend who once threw a surprise party for a dog. He's magnetic, funny, and allergic to calendars. In social settings, he positions himself as the guy who turns normal into memorable. There's a sweetness to people like that. You want to be near them because they make your life feel like an event. But if you've ever been gifted something you now have to manage, storage, timing, fallout, you know the other side. Surprise is fun when you choose it. When someone else chooses it for you, it's a power move dressed as confetti. Pack a carry-on, his message said. You're flying Friday, back Monday. I used your miles so you couldn't say no. Read that again and check your gut. If your first instinct is, wow, romantic, platonic romantic even, your second should be, wait, whose miles? Boundaries are rarely kicked down with malice. More often, they're tiptoed over by people convinced they're doing something lovely. That's how control cosplays as care. The itinerary opened with a confetti gif and a barcode. My name was right. The airline was the one I used. The balance of my miles had dropped to nearly zero. I sat there, stunned, watching the cursor blink like it was waiting for me to applaud. Then I looked at the destination code and felt my planner's brain seize. It wasn't where I was supposed to be next week. It wasn't where anyone I knew lived. And it wasn't even the country I had in mind. The ticket said Elias, Lisbon, Portugal. Let's pause here, because this is where archetypes start to flex. In stories about friendship, one role often plays the explorer, chasing novelty like oxygen. The other plays anchor, making sure the ship doesn't drift too far off course. The explorer says, life is short, let's go. The anchor replies, yes, but the mortgage isn't. Tyler had always been the explorer. He studied abroad twice, couch-surfed with strangers, and once hopped a train just because the station sign looked interesting. I admired that in theory. In practice, it exhausted me. I was the one who made sure rent got paid, who filed taxes early, who had a folder of emergency documents ready. Just in case. If you're more of an anchor, you already feel my chest tighten. Lisbon sounded incredible, but not on that weekend, not on those miles. That weekend, I had plans to meet with a foundation rep in D.C. It wasn't a party trip. It was an obligation trip, one that could open doors for kids who needed after-school support. And those miles? They were my cushion against a budget that didn't leave room for last-minute airfare. When someone wipes out your safety net, they don't just steal your miles. They steal your sense of control. I stared at the itinerary and tried to see it through Tyler's eyes. He probably pictured me lighting up, throwing clothes in a bag, texting, "You're insane but amazing." In his mind, he was elevating my life, shaking me out of routine. To people like him, routine is a prison. But to people like me, routine is scaffolding. You don't kick it away unless the structure underneath is strong. Your friendships probably balance on this tension, too. Who in your life pushes you into the unknown, and who steadies you when things wobble? Without explorers, anchors become rigid. Without anchors, explorers spin out. It's a dance that works, until someone mistakes the other's boundaries for boredom. I read his line again. I used your miles so you couldn't say no. That wasn't a gift. That was a dare, and I had to decide if I was going to play along or push back. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I closed the laptop and just sat with the quiet. That's another thing anchors do. We pause. We measure the weight of a choice before lifting it. Explorers leap and figure it out midair. Neither is wrong, but when one writes the script for both, you feel hijacked. By afternoon, my phone buzzed with Tyler's name. I let it go to voicemail. His voice came through excited, breathless. Dude, you're gonna love this. Pastiest de nada, father music, the ocean, it's all lined up. You deserve this. Deserve. Interesting word. Gifts framed as what you deserve are usually about what the giver wants to see. He wanted to see me grateful, loosened up, thrilled by spontaneity. In his mental movie, I was the co-star in his grand gesture. The psychological rub here is simple: control versus surrender. Most friendships survive on a rhythm of give and take. But when one person grabs the wheel, even with good intentions, the other has to decide if they'll ride along or slam the brakes. If you've ever been talked into fun you didn't consent to, you know the resentment that follows. The laugh doesn't land the same when it costs you something you'd saved. That night, I opened my mileage account online just to confirm. Balance, 3,442. Gone were the months of careful accumulation. Tyler had transferred them with my password, a detail that still stings. I'd given it to him once years ago, on a rushed booking when we traveled together. He'd filed it away, and apparently, so had the airline system. It wasn't theft in the legal sense, but psychologically, it felt like a trespass. I kept picturing the Foundation rep in D.C., waiting for me to show up ready, polished, dependable. And I'd pictured myself instead in Lisbon, jet-lagged, eating pastries, while an opportunity slipped. Anchors know this math by heart. One indulgence might equal one missed chance. Explorers argue the opposite. One indulgence might be the only chance. And there I was, holding both truths, with Friday's flight looming. The next morning, Tyler texted again. Checked you in already. Don't stress. Life's short. I read it 3 times. That phrase, don't stress, landed like a brick. To the explorer, stress is a sign you're doing life wrong. To the anchor, stress is the signal flare that tells you what matters. We don't run from it. We interpret it. Let's step back into archetypes again. The explorer thrives on novelty because it confirms freedom. Their deepest fear is being boxed in, unseen, or predictable. The anchor thrives on stability because it confirms safety. Their deepest fear is being blindsided. When explorers and anchors collide, both think they're rescuing the other. The explorer says, I'm freeing you from monotony. The anchor says, I'm protecting you from chaos. Both mean well. Both misread the other. I finally picked up when he called at lunch. You're quiet, he said. I'm shocked, I admitted. I needed those miles. He laughed like I was joking. Needed? Come on. You earn more. You can't put a price on memories. That's another explorer line. Memories over money. Story over structure. And if you're wired like that, it rings true. But if you're wired like me, you know some memories come with invoices. His laughter wasn't cruel. It was clueless. He couldn't imagine that his gift had a cost beyond his intention. After we hung up, I stared at my desk calendar. Friday's block was circled in blue pen. D.C. Foundation. Every part of me wanted to hold that commitment. But the flight he booked was real, the check-in was confirmed, and miles don't refund like cash. I was already in the system. So here's the pivot. Do you ever feel cornered into making a choice between loyalty and logic? That's where I was. Betray the planner in me who had worked for months, or betray the friend who believed he was giving me the adventure of a lifetime. Either way, something would break, and the clock was ticking down to Friday. Thursday night, I sat with my suitcase open on the bed. Half my clothes leaned toward Lisbon, light jackets, walking shoes, a guidebook I'd bought years ago but never used. The other half leaned toward D.C., blazer folders, USB stick with my presentation. It looked like 2 versions of me arguing in cotton and polyester. Archetypally, this is the crossroads moment. Every story has one, when your roles clash and you can't keep both. For anchors, the crossroads is brutal. We're trained to juggle, to manage competing demands, to stretch ourselves thinner instead of disappointing anyone. But here was a choice that refused to blend. I couldn't do Lisbon and D.C. at once. One path meant loyalty to mission, the other loyalty to friendship. Tyler called again, his voice buzzing with anticipation. Man, you're gonna thank me for this one day. Trust me. Trust me. Another loaded phrase. Explorers say it like a magic spell, as if trust cancels consequences. But Anchor's no trust isn't a free pass, it's a ledger. Every time someone cashes in without asking, the balance shifts. I asked him, why Lisbon? Why not somewhere closer? Or at least a weekend I wasn't booked solid? He chuckled. Because it's random. That's the point. You'd never choose it, so I did. He said it like he was handing me a gift I'd been too timid to unwrap. And maybe he was right, in his frame of the world. But in mine, it felt like he'd written over my calendar in permanent marker. That night I barely slept. I pictured the kids who could benefit from the foundation grant. I pictured myself eating seafood in Alfama, posting photos with Tyler, while a door closed quietly behind me. And then I pictured the miles, all gone, no matter what I chose. Anchors live for backup plans, and now mine was spent. By dawn, the suitcase was still half and half. My alarm buzzed. The flight to Lisbon was at 9:10. The train to D.C. left at 8:30. 2 clocks, one body, and I had to walk toward one of them. At 6 in the morning, I sat at the kitchen table with coffee gone cold. The suitcase was still half packed, and my phone kept lighting up with Tyler's messages, airplane emojis, "See you soon," and a picture of the Lisbon weather forecast. I hadn't told him I was wavering. Explorers thrive on momentum. Hesitation feels like betrayal. Anchors, though, hesitate by design. It's how we survive. I opened my laptop and stared at the presentation slides for D.C. My notes were sharp, my talking points timed, the numbers clear. Anchors lean on preparation because it levels the field. When you walk into a room with a deck ready, you carry authority. For me, those slides weren't just work, they were credibility. And credibility, once cracked, doesn't patch easily. Then I opened a new tab and typed, Lisbon must-sees. Photos of tiled streets, pastel buildings, and Atlantic views filled the screen. Beautiful, yes. But beauty wasn't the question. The question was, did I value spontaneity enough to risk unraveling months of effort? Or was the greater risk letting a friendship snap because I refused a gesture? This is the paradox of friendship between archetypes. Explorers test the limits of comfort. Anchors test the limits of patience. Both want connection, but they seek it through opposite currencies. The explorer spends chaos to buy intimacy. The anchor spends order to buy trust. When one pays with the wrong currency, the other feels robbed. By 7:15, the decision had crystallized. I shut the laptop, zipped the suitcase, and grabbed my wallet. But even then, walking toward the door, I felt the weight of both clocks ticking. Whichever path I chose, the other would brand me with a kind of failure, either professional or personal. And I wasn't sure yet which scar I was willing to wear. The cab pulled up at 7:30, and I still hadn't said where to go. The driver leaned back, asked, Union Station or O'Hare? My silence must have looked ridiculous. 2 destinations, opposite directions, each carrying a different version of me. Anchors don't like improvising under pressure, but here I was, improvising with my whole identity. In the end, I said, O'Hare. The word surprised even me. The driver nodded and merged into traffic. My pulse thudded like I'd just bet on the wrong horse. Anchors rarely choose the wilder option, but sometimes the logic of not wasting what's already gone pushes us there. The miles were already spent. If I skipped Lisbon, I'd be left with nothing. No trip, no miles, just resentment. At least showing up honored the cost already paid. On the way, I texted the foundation rep. Flight complications. Can we reschedule? A sterile lie, but it softened the blow. Anchors don't like lying, but we'll do it if it keeps a bridge intact. Her reply came quickly. We'll try. Calendar is tight. Not a no, not a yes. Just enough to make me wince. Tyler was waiting at the terminal, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled off the prank of the year. He hugged me, oblivious to the storm behind my smile. Man, this is going to be legendary. Legendary. Explorers love that word. It implies stories you'll retell forever. Anchors hear it differently. It's a reminder of the structure you dismantled to get here. As the plane took off, I looked down at Chicago shrinking beneath the clouds. This was happening. Against every instinct, I was flying toward a country I hadn't planned for, on a weekend I couldn't afford to lose. And beside me sat my best friend, beaming, convinced he'd given me the perfect gift. If you've ever gone along with something because the damage was already done, you know that mix of surrender and simmer. That's where I was, tray table down, wondering whether Lisbon would feel like liberation, or like a receipt I'd never stop paying. Lisbon was, predictably, gorgeous. The air smelled like salt and sugar, a mix of the ocean and those custard tarts Tyler wouldn't shut up about. He bounded through the narrow streets like a tour guide on caffeine, pointing at tile facades, dragging me into cafes, snapping photos of us against every viewpoint. People like him glow brighter in new places. You could see the explorer archetype feeding off discovery, his joy multiplying just by moving. I tried to mirror it, but anchors don't shift that easily. My mind kept drifting to what I wasn't doing, not in D.C., not in that boardroom, not delivering the presentation I'd rehearsed for weeks. Explorers can compartmentalize, here is now, so nothing else exists. Anchors carry the ledger everywhere. Even as I bit into a warm pastry, the sweetness was laced with guilt. Still, there were moments. A street musician played fado, mournful and beautiful, and Tyler grabbed my shoulder whispering, "Listen, man, this is life." And I did listen. For a few minutes, I let the music pull me out of the tally of lost opportunities. Anchors need those breaks. Otherwise, the weight gets unbearable. But then he said, "Aren't you glad I forced you?" That one line snapped me right back. Forced. He meant it playfully, but words carry archetypal truths. Explorers believe nudging someone into adventure is kindness. Anchors hear it as violation. I smiled thinly, not trusting myself to answer. By the second day, I realized something deeper. The trip wasn't about me at all. It was about him proving he could craft an unforgettable story. In his eyes, my role was to react with awe, to validate the gesture. And if I didn't, the whole thing risked deflating. Explorers thrive on witnesses. Anchors want partners. That's why the tension felt heavier than jet lag. Walking back to the hotel that night, I caught myself thinking, when we flew home, would I even recognize the friendship we left with? On the flight back, the cabin lights dimmed and Tyler was already asleep, headphones on, smiling faintly like a man satisfied with his masterpiece. I sat rigid, staring at the seatback screen, the glow of the map tracing our arc across the Atlantic. Explorers sleep easy after a leap. Anchors lie awake replaying the fallout. The fallout came quickly. My inbox was stacked with polite but pointed emails. The Foundation rep wrote, "We'll revisit next quarter. Timing is unfortunate." That was code for opportunity missed. Months of prep had evaporated in one weekend. Anchors know how fragile trust can be in professional spaces. Once you signal unreliability, it lingers. I scrolled past the emails and looked at Tyler. Archetypally, he was radiant in his own narrative. He believed he had given me freedom, carved out an adventure I'd thank him for later. He'd never see the invisible costs, credibility chipped, miles drained, the gnawing knowledge that my safety net was gone. Explorers rarely do. They see the laughter, the photos, the pastry crumbs, not the wreckage behind the curtain. You've probably had someone in your life like this. Someone who acts as if their joy is contagious enough to erase your stress. Maybe you even went along, because resisting would fracture something important. But afterward, in the quiet, you feel the fracture anyway. It just shifts from the relationship to yourself. When we landed in Chicago, he clapped me on the back, grinning. "Best birthday gift ever, right?" I smiled weakly. Anchors are trained to smooth over moments, to hold things steady, even when the structure underneath is cracking. But inside, I wasn't sure whether I could carry this friendship without collapsing under the weight of his gifts. Walking toward baggage claim, I realized the true cost wasn't the miles, or even the missed opportunity. It was the dawning sense that my friend and I no longer spoke the same language of care, and I wasn't sure we ever would again. Weeks later, the Lisbon photos sat untouched in my phone. Tyler had posted plenty, tagging me with captions like, "Epic memories," and "Best surprise ever." Friends commented with envy, but envy doesn't pay back miles or repair trust. Archetypally, it was the explorer's victory lap. He'd proved he could orchestrate adventure. For me, it was the anchor's hangover, sorting through consequences while pretending it was all fine. The Foundation meeting had been rescheduled, but without urgency. I was now in the category of maybe reliable, Maybe not. That's a subtle emotion you feel in the tone of emails, in how quickly calls get returned. Anchors live off reputation. Once a crack appears, you spend months patching it. And every time I opened my mileage account to that barren balance, the frustration resurfaced. I met Tyler for coffee a month later. He was animated, already talking about the next big thing. I stopped him, calm, steady, deliberate, the way anchors do when we've hit the limit. I told him I couldn't have my resources used without permission again, that the miles weren't just numbers. They represented planning, safety, trust. He frowned, genuinely confused. But I gave you Lisbon, he said, and there it was, the gulf between us, wider than the Atlantic. Explorers see care as disruption. Anchors see care as protection. Neither is wrong, but when you mistake one for the other, someone gets hurt. Friendship, like travel, needs both, someone to steer, someone to launch. But both have to agree on the direction. We still talk, but less. The bond didn't shatter, it thinned. Bittersweet, because I still admire his fire, and maybe he still values my ballast. But the lesson sits quietly now. Not every surprise is a gift, and not every safety net can be rebuilt. Sometimes the miles don't just take you to a place. They take you to a truth you've been avoiding. And once you land there, you can't unlearn it.